Hello, we are back for the second video on how to write an excellent paper. If you have not watched the first video on the writing process, I would suggest you look at that first. Everything I have to say here will make a lot more sense once you've been through that video. So let's get right into it. How to write a great paper, part 2, the sequel. First of all, we need to talk about the pre-writing. I talked about this in the last video, that you don't want to dive straight into the writing of your paper, straight onto the keyboard. You need to do those first few steps first, the first few that I described in the process there. That's often referred to as pre-writing, so that's how I'm going to refer to it here. The first step we came across was brainstorming, so just a few more details about what that actually means. What you're doing when you're brainstorming is either choosing or defining a topic for your paper. So you're getting into your own head, knocking around, seeing what ideas you have, what questions you can come up with, how creative you can be. You never know what's going to happen once you start thinking about a subject and once you start poking around. So you want to put some energy into that. Of course, you need to understand and stay within the parameters of your paper. This is very important. You might come up with a really great idea, but if it doesn't match the question that you're trying to answer or the assignment you have, it's not going to work out very well. So write down everything that you come up with. Okay, you don't want to lose these great ideas. I mean, it's classic. You come up with a great idea in the shower, and by the time you're out of there, it's gone, right? So you don't want to lose it. As you think of things, write down your ideas, write down your questions, even if you think they're irrelevant or they're kind of peripheral, they're not really important. They might trigger something down the line. So make sure you write them down. That way you have everything possible written down to work with. It's never too early to experiment with a thesis statement, trying to figure out exactly what it is you want to talk about. It's going to be really rough at this stage. But you might find something that you're really curious about, something that you really want to talk about, or something that just makes more sense to you than any other aspect of the question that you've been asked. So you can start messing with the thesis statement anywhere along the line. And I would suggest you're probably going to do that right here in the brainstorming part of the exercise. Often you'll come up blank. You won't really know what to do. You won't have many ideas. There's ways of breaking through that wall. One is free writing, which means just sitting down and writing whatever comes to mind. Don't worry if it makes sense. Don't worry about it, being worth publishing or anything like that. Just get the pen going on the paper or get your fingers flying on the keyboard. Just write down whatever comes into your mind on that topic. Maybe you're doing a biology paper on butterflies. Just write down everything you think about butterflies. Small, fragile, they migrate. Do they migrate? Do they all? I'm not sure. Some do, thousands of miles. How can they do that when they're such little critters? Anything that comes into your mind, just write it down. See what happens. When you look back after 5 minutes or so, then you might find some really good ideas came out, something for you to start with. Some people are very visual. You might have to sketch out your ideas. I know some students have used Post-it notes, scribbled down on those and stuck them all over the room. Whatever works for you to make sense of things in your mind, go ahead and do that. Some people need to just walk around, go for a hike, or sit in the sun and ponder. Once again, whatever you need to do to break through, don't worry about it. Coming up against a wall and not knowing what to do right off the hop is not uncommon. So there's no need to feel bad about that. So there you go, brainstorming. The next stage of pre-writing is your research. Again, we talked about it, that it may come, a little bit further down in the process, and you may have to do it again and again. But either way, whenever you come to it, I shamelessly take advantage of your librarian. That might be a bit of an overstatement, but I cannot stress enough how great a resource the librarians are when it comes to research. They know all the research methodologies that are going to work. They know all the sources, all the databases. If you can define your topic, they'll know exactly where you do and do not want to go and where you run into problems. They have all kinds of tips. So Don't flail about on your own. Make sure you take advantage of the skills of the librarians, and spend some time on those databases and learning those e-tools that they're going to point out. There's lots of cool tech out there that will keep track of everything that you've looked at, all the articles that you want to keep and you want to review. It'll create bibliographies for you out of that. There's a lot of time-saving tools and great focusing tools that you have there. So spend time on them. It's a great investment of time. You might think you're wasting a bit of time. You got a deadline coming up, but believe me, you're going to thank yourself for it later on. Very important to define your keywords and terms. You're going to be searching for articles out there. You need to know what the keywords are that you're searching for and be very specific, and then mess around with them a bit and see if you get different results. Once again, the librarian will help you kind of define these things. Some things will come out of your lectures or from previous readings. So make sure that you use those as keywords. They call them keywords because they unlock the whole treasure trove of information out there. So pay attention to those. When you do find a good article, look at their bibliography. Look at who they refer to. Who do they think is an expert in the field? What kind of articles are they talking about? Which papers seem to be important? Why is everybody talking about this one paper or this one idea? And then that's something you can go searching for. So mine those bibliographies for all kinds of great information. Okay, now once you've got your articles, you need to read them. You got to get some good information out of them. Talked a little bit about critical reading, being able to question the information that you're looking at. And that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to question the literature, but you're not just looking for nuggets of information. You're looking for ways of thinking, for new perspectives, for ways of both examining and interpreting information. You're looking for the broader sense of things. So keep that in mind, that you're looking for the big picture and the specifics of how you get there. Every source needs to be evaluated. Not every source is worth using. Again, your librarian will help with that, but you need to check things for relevance. Is it actually on your topic, or is it just kind of related in a kind of sideways slanted sort of relationship? Is it a scholarly source? Typically, Google is not. 80 to 90% of what's on Google is not worth using. There is something called Google Scholar, which helps. That'll kind of weed out a lot of that nonsense. But other databases are much more applicable. So check and make sure that you're actually using a scholarly source. Check the publication date and make sure that it's current. Something from 50 years ago might be relevant, but it probably is not. So you want to make sure that you're up to date. You want to check for biases. If you're reading an article on conservation that's written by a conservation group in a conservation magazine, they're going to have a conservation bias. That doesn't mean they're wrong. That doesn't mean that their information is incorrect, but you need to be aware of the bias and weigh the information with that in regard. So check their bibliography as well. If they have no bibliography, if they are coming up with an idea that's not supported by anybody else, then you might want to be a little suspicious. You might want to handle that information with care. So you want to examine their evidence. You want to make sure that what you're reading is supported, that their claims and their evidence match, that they don't have any logical fallacies. Make sure that the information and the ways of thinking, their ideas are actually worth using. Maybe they just have anecdotal information that, this is what happened to me. Anecdotal is not always wrong, especially with historical documents and historical perspective. But you do have to treat it with care, and look as to whether or not they are actually proving something with their article, or whether they're just implying something. Have they really convinced you or not? Right? So make sure you've got a quality source there. You might also want to consider the context. What kind of an article is it? Is this part of a larger conversation on, the primary education and the importance of reading instruction? I mean, there's an awful lot out there on that. Or is this something that is brand new? Are they coming up with a brand new idea? Which, cool, I like that. I love brand new ideas. But you have to figure out whether that is supported and where you go with that. So be careful about the type of information you're looking at. As you do this critical reading, you're going to want to summarize what you're coming up with. Quite often, a prof will ask you to do an annotated bibliography, which means you list all your sources, kind of break down the basic things that they say and how that might be useful for your paper. So learning how to do one of those is great. If you don't want to do that full exercise, you can just make a list of all the talking points, all the important points through the paper, or maybe just highlight the main arguments so that you can always refer back to them later on as you're working on your paper. Once you've done your critical reading and you understand the information that you've collected, now you have to do some critical thinking. You have to work with that information and come up with a way of using it to synthesize something good in your own paper, right? To come up with a good argument, good justification, and a good conclusion. So you've already started by evaluating what other people are saying, and now you need to throw yourself into it. You need to involve yourself in the conversation. Are you ready for this? This is the biggest, ugliest bullet I think I've ever put on any slide, but it's perfect. When it comes to describing critical thinking, every aspect is there. Everything that you want to think about is there. And I just can't get past it. So the idea of critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, where am I, synthesizing and or evaluating information. So that's it. You're starting with gathering, analyzing, and thinking about information, right? So all of those aspects of it there. This information is gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication. So it could be your own experience or that of the people who have written papers that you're looking at. So you're dealing with the information. This is where the information is coming from. You're using this as a guide to belief and action. So you're using this in order to convince people of the point that you're trying to make, the thesis you're trying to make. And through that belief, you're suggesting action. So in its finest form, in its exemplary form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter. So it doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's theology or literature or biology, the same principles apply when you're critically thinking. And these things that you're looking for are clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reasons, depth and breadth of your topic, and fairness. Now, this last part is great because you can test your own paper against this. Have I been clear? Am I being accurate? Is my argument consistent? Am I using sound evidence? All of it. Am I being fair with all the quotes that I'm using? So you can test yourself against this and make sure that you've created a paper that meets the bar of good critical thinking. Okay, moving on. You need to organize your research. This read with a pencil means you've printed it out and you're working on paper, but you can do the equivalent on the computer as well. I've got read with a pencil, record points of significance. There's a 2 margins method where as you're reading down one margin, you kind of summarize what it is you're reading. Maybe for each paragraph, you put down 1 or 2 words about what the main point is. You know, maybe a few more words to describe something very particularly important. On the other margin, you write down your questions or why you might have problems with what they're saying. Where do we need further evidence, that kind of thing. So you've got a summary on one side and a challenge on the other side. If you're not going to do this on paper, then find some way to keep track of what it is you're reading and how you're evaluating it. You need to categorize your research. So it's not necessarily a binary black and white kind of thing where you can look at pros and cons, theoretical and versus practical. It may be a topical thing. If you are talking about conservation or the environment. You might have categories for animals, for plant life, for hydrology, for soil degradation, whatever. Now you've got 4 categories that you can organize your ideas under. So find a way to organize everything that you've come up with, something that makes sense to you, something that you're going to be able to work with. So you're going to want to then order that information you have. Make sure there's a logical progression there. You're going to have to be kind to the reader as they work their way through your paper. Make sure it makes sense. Make sure it all fits together and it's easy to understand. Make sure every point actually advances your thesis, the one thing that you're trying to say. So first you group it, and then you put those groups into order. And now here's where it gets a little messy. Find your own best method. People think in a variety of different ways, either visually or orally or linear. Some people need pictures and relationships. Whatever works best for you. I know that doesn't sound very helpful, but you will have a way that works best for you. And it's just a matter of discovering what that is. If you're having difficulty and you can't find a method that works for you, again, you can always talk to folks in the Writing Center. We'll come up with a few ideas for you. Thesis construction is difficult at the best of times, trying to define exactly that one point. Keep in mind, though, that your thesis will answer a question. Quite often, your prof won't ask you for a thesis. They'll ask you for a research question. What is the question that you want to approach? And then your thesis is going to be the answer to that question. So in either case, the thesis will answer a question or make some kind of an assertion. It states one argument that you're going to pursue. It's very focused, and it should show up basically in one sentence that's fairly easy to pick out in the introduction. Man, you have to be clear. You have to be very specific, very clear, very intentional, so that the reader will know for sure what it is that you want to talk about. Keeping in mind the reader is your prof, and you want them to understand what you're talking about. You want to create a unique argument, and it's something that you're going to debate. It's usually not something you can prove. So it's an act of convincing or bringing someone on side so that they accept your conclusion and accept your thesis. You need to show awareness of what's out there. You can't totally ignore everything that's out there for previous research and ideas. You need to be a part of the discourse, whatever topic you're talking about. And you're going to either synthesize a new idea or analyze something, but you're not just reporting. Okay, you're not, especially if you're talking about literature, do not do plot summaries. Don't tell us what happened in the book. Analyze what happened in the book. Okay, a bit more deep thinking than just reporting. So your thesis is going to express a complex idea, but it has to be expressed clearly. So a thesis can always be tested with your prof. They like it if you come in and say, okay, does this make sense? This is what I've come up with. Is this workable? If not, what can I do to make sure that I'm pointing in the right direction before I start? Again, the Writing Center is also a great resource for this. So outlining your paper is, I've mentioned before, is very important. The basic format is 1, 2, 3. This is what you've seen in high school. Some kind of an introduction. You work your way through the arguments, then you come up with a conclusion. That middle part there can look a lot different depending on what the assignment is, right? In the introduction, though, you need to provide some kind of context. Your thesis statement is going to be your one argument, but you can't just throw it at the reader. You have to let us know what the background is that this thesis statement stands on. Clear and concise thesis is critical again. 3 to 5 point arguments in the middle, maybe some subpoints and some different evidence that you have in there. I hate to put a number on here because every topic requires as much discussion as it requires, period, right? So you can't say that a 3-point argument is where you want to go. The human brain likes 3. 3 tends to work, but it may be 4, it may be 5. If you have 6 different arguments, probably 2 of them or 3 of them might fit together, or they could be combined into something a bit more concise. Otherwise, you're covering way too much ground. You've got a bit of a problem with the breadth of your topic. So keep in mind, you're going to probably stick within that 3 to 5 argument outline. Everything needs to progress your argument. Everything needs to point towards the thesis statement. Typically going in a fairly straight line, although sometimes you have to take some bunny trails just so that you can seal them off, discuss arguments that come up in the discourse. We can talk more about that as you work through your papers. And then your conclusion, of course, which kind of restates the thesis, but brings it closer to the paper. A little bit of, see, I told you so. I had a great idea, and now I've convinced you. And possibly enters a larger discourse on the topic as well. So your first draft, again, is going to follow a clear course from thesis statement to conclusion, and you're aiming to persuade. For each point and your argument as a whole, you have to work through the logical idea of the premise that you're working on, the base information that you're working on, the claim that you're making, which is your argument, and then some evidence to support the claim that you're making. This is often referred to as the warrant. This is often where you will use secondary sources to support your claim or support your idea. So that is going to be your basic argument construction. You need to test those premises, though, and make sure that they're solid, because they are the foundation of your argument. You don't want any generalizations in there or anything that could be attacked before people even get to the claim you're trying to make. Avoid logical fallacies. Of course, there's a variety of them. There's a poster in the Writing Center that describes a wide variety of logical fallacies. It's worth looking at to see what the most common ones are and which you want to avoid. The big thing is get your first draft done. Don't worry about making it pretty. Don't worry about making it perfect. Just get it done. Get your ideas down. Pound through that first draft and then walk away and let it sit. Take that break that we talked about in the last video. Okay, you've taken a break, and now you're coming back to do a revision to check everything out. And you start with the big picture issues and then work down to the more fine points. So you start with, is my paper actually focused? Does it drive towards a thesis? Does it seem to have a purpose? Have I got it organized properly? Is there a strategy to what I've done? Am I missing some content? Are there holes that need to be filled? So identify where more information is needed, do more research, recruit a second pair of eyes, get somebody else to read the paper, somebody who hasn't been looking at this, for the last week. So somebody who will find where points aren't necessarily as clear as they need to be. And then again, walk away and repeat your revision as often as necessary. Often going through it the second time, it might be sufficient, but you might want to give it a third look through after you've taken another break. Then you do the editing and the polishing, making sure your paragraphs are solid, they make sense, you have good sentences, strong sentences, you haven't chosen the wrong words, that kind of thing. You choose your grammar, your punctuation. Style will often be either MLA or APA. There will be rules as to how you organize your paper, how you handle citations, whether you do a works cited page or a bibliography. So make sure that your style has been adhered to. Know your bad habits, especially after you get your first paper back. You'll have comments from your prof, and you'll know exactly where you tend to make errors. So if you tend to have problems with comma splice sentences, then check your paper for those and make sure that you haven't done that all over again. So if you run into writer's block, you know what, it happens. And it's hard not to get too frustrated and get totally blocked. So there are things that you can do. One is to step away. A bit of time and distance helps. And when you come back, maybe you'll be in a different frame of mind. You can try writing with no filter, the free writing that I talked about, or a blitz, or don't worry about the tone, just go for it. Turning off the editor is often really tough when you're writing a draft. You're not happy with what you're writing, but just turn it off. I think it was Hemingway that said the first draft of anything is, well, I won't tell you what he called it, but yeah, don't worry about it. First draft, just go for it. Sometimes the 2-minute blitz, just turning off your mind and letting your fingers fly on the keyboard, see what happens, and some good ideas may come out of that. Set realistic goals. You might not be able to hammer out the whole draft in one day. That's fine. I've heard that, any day where you write one good sentence is a good day. You're going to want to aim for more than one good sentence, but realistic goals, keep that in mind. And whatever, find your own happy place. Some people need crowds and noise. Some people need quiet. Some people can only write 10 minutes at a time. Some people have to do it all in one blitz. Whatever works for you, find where that is and stick with it. Make it work. Okay, that was a bit longer than I was hoping for. But I hope you got the gist. If you need any information on process or individual elements of the writing process, by all means, make an appointment with the Writing Center, and we'll be happy to discuss it with you. We love talking about papers in progress. So that's it. There will be one more video about common problems and just things that you might want to avoid. So in the meantime, good luck, and we'll see you soon.